The snow covered our tracks before we realized we'd passed the same dead elk 3 times.
That part didn't make the official report.
They just wrote, "We got disoriented," in whiteout conditions.
That sounded clean, you know?
Like something a normal person could actually wrap their head around.
But there's a huge difference between getting lost in a storm and having the forest move you right back to where it wants you.
By the 3rd time we found that elk, its ribs were wide open to the sky.
And the snow inside the cavity was packed down perfectly smooth.
And it looked exactly like someone had been sleeping in there.
Nobody said a word for a while.
We just stood there freezing.
Then Deputy Harlan raised his gloved hand and pointed past the cottonwoods.
About 50 yards away, right between the trees, a Park Service coat was hanging from a branch.
I stared at it for a second, trying to make sense of it. It was mine.
Before I go further, I gotta say something I don't usually say out loud.
I know folks listen to these looking for a spooky story.
But don't mistake attention for entertainment. Because some places notice when they're watched.
This all went down in January 2004, up in the northeast corner of Yellowstone.
I was 37, still wearing the green and gray.
Stationed near Tower Roosevelt, covering a stretch most tourists never see.
Winter out in that country isn't quiet the way people think it is.
It groans.
The trees crack under the ice, and the snowpack settles with these loud thuds.
It sounds like heavy furniture being dragged across an upstairs room.
Awestruck and poetic, bison move through the valleys like dark stones pushed by their own breath.
And the wolves leave lines of prints so straight they look measured.
At night, when the wind howls down from the mountains, the whole basin feels like it's inhaling.
The nightmare started with a missing maintenance contractor named Ellis Vaught.
He was an ex-lineman who knew how to dress for the weather.
He knew the roads and when not to push his luck.
That's what made it feel wrong, right from the jump.
At 9:43, dispatch got a broken transmission from him.
First, it was just static.
Then Ellis said, completely calm, that somebody was standing inside the trees.
Say in a natural American voice, chilling realization. He said the guy was wearing summer clothes.
By noon, we found his snowmobile parked by the service spur. The engine was dead, but the key was still in it.
His tool bag was just sitting there on the seat.
There was only one set of boot prints leading away from the machine.
They went 30 yards into the timber and just stopped.
They ended at a patch of bare ground where the snow had melted down to black earth.
Search and rescue came in, along with park law enforcement and county deputies.
We worked grid patterns through that timber until the light completely failed.
We didn't find a single trace of them. That next morning was when we found the first wrong thing. It wasn't Ellis.
It was a payphone?
Just standing upright in the trees, about half a mile from the road.
It was one of those heavy metal payphones you'd see outside an old gas station.
There was no line, no pole, no concrete pad underneath it.
The receiver was just hanging there from its cord.
One of the younger rangers started laughing, just because he didn't know what else to do.
Harlan told him to shut up. The chrome on the phone was actually warm when I touched it.
And then the receiver clicked.
Nobody had even touched it. I leaned in, and from the earpiece came this thin, faraway man's voice.
It was just breathing through the static at first.
Then it said, "Ranger Belnose."
I had never heard that voice in my life. Say in a natural American voice. Rationalizing fear, we bagged the receiver like evidence, because that's what you do when you're trying not to panic.
We took photos, marked the coordinates, and called it a probable hoax.
By evening, the whole thing was conned. Not knocked over or buried, just gone.
The hole in the snow was filled in perfectly smooth.
Say in a natural American voice. Chilling realization. And right over that spot were tracks, like someone walking barefoot in a circle.
I didn't sleep a wink that night.
That voice on the phone dug up a memory I'd spent 13 years trying to bury.
Back in '91, I was a rookie, and a seasonal ranger named Caroline Price vanished on my watch.
We were checking out reports of strange lights up near Slough Creek.
We figured it was just campers or poachers.
Instead, we found a line of kids' mittens tied to the branches with fishing line, all frozen stiff.
Say, in a natural American voice, filled with regret, Carolyn wanted to call it in, but I told her we should keep pushing.
That was my first mistake.
The snow started coming down hard, the trail vanished, and my compass needle just spun before pointing straight down into the dirt.
Then we heard our supervisor calling our names from the trees.
He sounded annoyed, like we were late for a meeting.
Say, in a natural American voice, filled with dread, Caroline shined her light, and there was a guy in a yellow rain poncho, just standing there in the freezing cold.
The mouth under that hood wasn't moving.
Then, right behind us, something spoke using Caroline's exact voice.
She bolted into the brush, and I just froze. I stood there like a coward until the sound of her running just stopped.
13 years later, that payphone told me it knew what I did.
By day 3 of the search for Ellis, the storm hadn't let up for a second. There were 5 of us pushing north toward Specimen Ridge, walking through a total whiteout.
We had a county search dog with us, a black lab named Juniper.
About 40 minutes into the timber, she just stopped dead. She tucked her tail, sat down facing the trees, and wouldn't take another step.
That's when Mills asked if we heard it.
At first, it sounded like water dripping, which made no sense in that kind of cold. Then it got clearer. It was an old mechanical phone ringing deep in the woods.
Harlan looked at me, and every instinct I had screamed to turn back.
Instead, I told him to stay tight, and we moved toward it.
But no matter how far we walked, the ringing stayed the exact same distance ahead of us.
Eventually, the trees opened up into this small, perfectly round clearing.
The snow in the center was totally untouched and smooth.
And right in the middle stood an old wooden information board, just waiting for us.
We got closer to the board. Pinned to the wood were 5 Polaroids. Each one showed one of us standing right there in the clearing.
But it was night, and our eyes were closed.
Mills reached out, his hand shaking, trying to grab his picture.
Decker grabbed his wrist hard and told him not to touch it.
Then, that mechanical ringing started up again.
Right under the board, half buried in the snow, was the receiver from that payphone.
Just the receiver and the cord, trailing down into the white like a black root.
Harlan raised his shotgun, though none of us knew what he was aiming at.
Then, Ellis Vaught's voice came out of the receiver.
He said, "It walks where the map has been folded."
The dog started barking, but not at the trees.
She was barking at Rosa.
Rosa backed away, and then she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers.
Ranger Bell left her.
Nobody moved.
Rosa clapped her hands over her mouth, terrified.
Then the air just lost its shape.
Snowflakes hung too long in the air.
Decker whispered that we needed out.
We turned south, back toward the road.
The compass pointed south. The GPS showed us heading south. We walked for 20 minutes.
And then we stepped right back into the clearing.
The information board was gone.
The photographs were just lying face up on the snow.
But now, there were 6.
The new one showed Ellis Vaught standing behind us, his face all blurred. Mills started crying quietly, which somehow made it worse.
Harlan cursed at his GPS.
We tried again, heading west this time.
We marked the trees with orange tape as we went.
We walked until my legs burned and my face went numb.
Then we found it. A dead elk. But there was no blood. No tracks. Just
clean bones, with the snow inside packed smooth like a bed.
Harlan told us to keep moving.
So we did.
20 minutes later, we found it again.
Same elk. Same hollow?
Same smooth snow inside.
Decker just pointed at the orange tape tied to the pine beside it.
Our tape.
We turned without speaking.
There was nothing left to say.
But when we found the elk a third time, something else was waiting for us. A Park Service coat was hanging in the trees.
Not the one I was wearing.
Another one.
It was my coat.
Same size.
Same patch.
It even had the same tear near the left pocket where I'd caught it on a nail the winter before.
It just hung from a branch, the sleeves dangling straight down.
Harlan approached it slowly. He didn't want to touch it with his hands, so he lifted the collar with the barrel of his shotgun.
There was a name tag pinned to the front.
Caroline Prodis.
The world just narrowed after that.
Say, in a distant memory, I remember Mills saying my name.
I remember Rosa praying.
Then, from inside the empty coat came a radio chirp.
My own radio answered it. 2 quick bursts of static.
And then a woman's voice spoke right from my shoulder.
It was Caroline.
She sounded older.
Tired.
She asked, "Daniel, why didn't you come after me?"
My knees almost went out.
Say, in a natural American voice. Defensive. Harlan reached for my radio, but I shoved him back.
Then the voice said, "It still wears you sometimes."
Then the coat lifted by itself. Absolute certainty. It wasn't the wind. The sleeves rose up slightly, like arms had just slipped inside them.
Pure terror. And then the empty hood turned right toward us.
That was when Juniper broke free and ran.
Say, in a natural American voice, Rosa screamed and went right after her.
It was the mistake that split us.
Harlan managed to grab Rosa before she got 10 steps into the trees.
But Mills ran after the dog. I saw him vanish between 2 pines, his yellow vest flashing once in the storm.
We were shouting his name.
Then his voice came from behind us. He said, "I'm here."
We turned around. Mills was standing right beside the elk carcass. But he was also still shouting ahead of us in the trees.
Say in a natural American voice, creeping dread. The Mills beside the elk was just smiling.
A small, polite smile.
His face was pale and wet.
Harlan didn't even hesitate. He just pulled the trigger.
But there was no sound, just a flash of light and snow exploding off the bark.
Then that thing just stepped back into the whiteout and was gone.
Then the real Mills screamed from somewhere deep in the trees.
We found him a minute later, just standing there with his hands clamped over his ears.
He was alive, but the roots of his hair had turned dead white.
He wouldn't look at us, just kept staring at nothing.
He kept whispering over and over that there was a station under the ground. We grabbed his arms and just started dragging him through the drifts.
I don't know if the sun went down early or if time just stopped making sense.
But the storm finally broke enough for us to see a light ahead.
It was a cabin, glowing warm in the freezing dark.
Bitter irony. For a second, I actually thought we were saved.
Then I saw the sign out front for the Slough Creek Ranger Station.
We were miles from Slough Creek, and that building burned down in '87.
It was standing right there, completely whole, with smoke coming out of the chimney.
I couldn't look away. Then someone walked past the window inside. It was Caroline.
Vivid memory. The front door opened and this wave of warm air hit us, smelling like coffee in a wood fire.
She was just standing there in her old uniform.
Say in a natural American voice. Chilling realization. She looked right at us and said, "We made it back."
Say in a natural American voice. You could hear people talking inside, like a normal, busy morning at the station.
Mills just lost it and started walking straight toward the porch like he was in a trance.
Decker had to tackle him into the snow to stop him.
The lights flickered, but her face didn't change at all.
She stared right through me, and told me to confess what I did.
Harlan raised his shotgun, but he was shaking so bad he couldn't even hold it straight.
She took a step down off the porch.
I looked down at her boots hitting the ground.
Terrified realization. The snow underneath her didn't compress. It didn't even shift.
Grim survival. That one little detail is what saved us.
That one little detail saved us. Not my training, not some burst of courage.
Just the fact that her boot didn't leave a print.
I turned around and ran like a coward.
I didn't give an order or count heads.
I just ran and the rest of them followed.
The next few minutes are completely broken in my memory. Just trees passing way too close, and lungs burning.
I could hear Mills sobbing somewhere behind me. Rosa was screaming for her dog, and Harlan was just cursing God. Decker let out this laugh that didn't sound like a joke at all.
We were just trying to survive.
And then the ground just vanished.
I fell right through the snow and hit War.
The Lamar River had been hiding under a thick shelf of ice.
The cold hit me so hard, it actually felt hot.
My legs completely seized up in the Kermit.
I was clawing at the slush and the rocks, trying to find a hold.
You don't realize how fast freezing water drains the life out of you.
I thought that was it.
Then someone grabbed the back of my harness and hauled me out.
It was Harlan. He pulled me sideways onto the bank and saved my life.
Even though he never spoke a single word to me after that day.
I was freezing, shaking so hard I could barely breathe.
I looked back across the river.
On the far bank, through the trees, that old station was still there.
Its windows were burning bright in the dark.
The porch wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with people.
All of them wearing Park Service green.
Some I recognized from old missing person files. People we'd spent weeks looking for.
Caroline was standing right at the front, and right beside her was Ellis Vaught. Say in a natural American voice, the bitter irony, the guy we'd been out there searching for this whole time. He was holding that black telephone receiver pressed against his ear. We just stared at him across the water.
And then every single light in that station went out at once.
Just pitch black. After that, the real world finally started coming back in pieces.
The real world came back to us in pieces.
A rescue team found us right at Dar.
They said we were less than 200 yards from the Rowan.
We'd been missing for 11 hours.
Mills didn't remember a single thing after the clearing.
Rosa's dog turned up 3 days later by a maintenance shed.
She was alive, but she'd never go near the timber again.
Decker just packed it up and retired that spring.
Harlan transferred out to another county.
He never spoke a word to me again.
But he did send me one letter. No return address.
It just had 6 words inside. You should have stayed with her.
They never found Ellis Vaught.
The official report just blamed exposure and wildlife.
They said the photos were contaminated, and the radio tapes were static.
I signed my name on that report.
That's just another thing I gotta live with.
I quit the Park Service 2 years later.
I started hearing phones ringing in places where there weren't any.
Say, in a natural American voice, trailheads, empty bathrooms.
Even my own garage at 3 in the morning.
I never answered.
Last winter, I got a padded envelope in the mail.
No postmark. No return address. Just sitting there waiting for me.
I knew right away something was wrong.
Inside was a Polaroid.
Say in a natural American voice, remembering with dread. It showed that old wooden information board out in the snow.
There were 6 photos pinned to it. 5 of them were the old ones.
Chilling realization. But the 6th one was new.
The new picture showed me asleep at my kitchen table.
And standing right behind me in the window's reflection, it was Caroline.
Her hand was resting on my shoulder.
Say in a natural American voice, absolute horror. The photograph was still warm,
I keep it shoved in a drawer now.
buried under tax papers and batteries.
Bitter irony. Just normal stuff a guy uses to pretend his life is ordinary.
Sometimes I'd take it out and try to tell myself it's just a reflection. But every January, when the cold really sets in,
Say in a natural American voice, a phone starts ringing in my kitchen.
I don't even own a kitchen phone.
It rings twice, then twice again, and through the wall, I can hear boots walking across a wooden porch.
even now, I still think about the sheer scale of Yellowstone in the dead of winter.
It's a place that exists entirely on its own terms, completely indifferent to us. The snow just keeps falling, burying the roads, the trails, and the memories. People always ask me if I ever want to go back out there. They think there's some kind of logical explanation just waiting to be found.
But they don't get that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved.
They are just meant to be survived.
I think about Ellis Vaught a lot.
He was a guy who knew the land, respected the weather, and still got swallowed up.
It's like the forest just decided to fold in on him.
Say in a natural American voice, steady and observant. Search teams still go out, walking grids over ground that shifts when you aren't looking.
And then there's Caroline.
Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, wandering through that frozen timber.
Perfectly preserved in a year that's long gone.
That anomaly wasn't just a place on a map. It was like a tear in time itself, holding on to the people it took.
The Park Service tries to keep things clean and understandable.
They write up reports about exposure and disorientation.
It's a lot easier to blame the freezing cold.
Easier than admitting the wilderness actually has a memory. And sometimes it wakes up.
I still remember the absolute silence of that clearing.
It wasn't that peaceful quiet you get during a snowfall.
It was heavy, like a room where everyone's holding their breath.
The kind of silence that makes you realize how small you really are.
Deputy Harland understood that better than any of us. He saw the impossible, raised his weapon, and realized bullets can't stop the landscape.
His silence after they pulled us out wasn't about anger.
It was the silence of a man who knew the world was fundamentally broken.
And young Mills, he looked right into the heart of it. It burned away his youth in an absolute instant.
He's survived the cold, but his mind is still trapped in those pines.
We brought his body back, but we really left him out there. Sometimes, in my dreams, I'm standing on the banks of the Lamar River again. I look across the freezing water and see that old ranger station. The amber light spills onto the snow, looking so warm and inviting. And I feel this overwhelming urge to just cross over and finally rest.
But I always wake up before I take that step.
I wake up to the wind rattling my windows and my ordinary life. I survived the whiteout, but I carry that chill in my bones. I'm just a witness to the impossible now, waiting for the day the wilderness finally calls me back. I turned in my badge 2 years later.
I just couldn't do it anymore.
Not after the phones started ringing in places where there weren't any.
I'd hear them at empty trailheads or echoing in my garage at 3 in the morning.
The breaking point was during a training seminar over in Idaho.
I was walking past a sealed evidence locker, and I heard that exact same mechanical ring coming from inside.
2 short bursts. Then a pause. I never answered it, but you don't have to pick up for the message to reach you. I really tried to build a normal life after that. I wanted to be as far away from the snow and the pines as I could get. But last winter, I found a padded envelope sitting in my mail.
No postmark, no return address, nothing.
I opened it right there at my kitchen table. My hands were shaking before I even pulled the thing out. It was just a single Polaroid photograph. And right there in the glossy frame was that old wooden information board,
standing in the falling snow.
Pinned to the dark wood in the picture were 6 smaller photos. 5 of them were the exact same ones we found that day in the clearing. But the 6th one...
The 6th one was brand new.
That new photo showed me sitting exactly where I was, right at my own kitchen table. In the picture, I was fast asleep with my head resting on my arms.
Say in a natural American realization, whoever took it was standing right inside my house. But that wasn't even the worst part.
Behind me in the photo, barely visible in the dark reflection of the window, was Caroline.
She was wearing her old winter uniform, and her hand was resting right on my shoulder.
When I touched the Polaroid, the paper was still warm.
I keep that picture shoved in a drawer now, buried under tax papers and spare batteries.
I surround it with normal, boring stuff to pretend my life is still ordinary. Some nights I pull it out and try to convince myself it's just a trick of the light.
But I know it's not.
Say in a natural American voice, ominous and steady. Every January, when the temperature drops hard and the wind starts howling against the house, it happens again. A phone in my kitchen starts to ring. 2 short bursts, then a pause. The thing is, I don't even own a kitchen phone.
It just rings twice, and then twice again, echoing in the dark.
And if I listen close, right through the wall behind it, I can hear boots.
Heavy boots crossing a wooden porch.
A porch that burned to the ground years before I ever put on the uniform.